Today we're going to be talking about Leadoo AI and how you can basically use it to, increase your conversions and improve sort of the website visitor experience. If you are new to our webinars, so just some introductions first. So I'm Gavin, I'm Technical Account Manager at Leadoo, and with me today is Helen, who's our Onboarding Development Manager. If you've been through on some of these before, this is our 7th one now. I think we've been doing one every month this year. So they're all on YouTube if you want to go back and check those out. There'll be things about bot building and live chat and other tools and features we have. So you can always look out for those. But today we're going to be focusing solely on AI. Obviously, very excited about our tool, and I'm sure everyone who's joined today is going to be excited about it because it's it's still the buzzword. Really, it's still everyone wants to know what each company is going to be doing with it. So we're going to be giving you a bit of an overview of what our AI tool is, what it does, what it can do, and then we're going to sort of break that down into the different parts. So the knowledge base, which is the content that it'll learn from, and how you can train the AI on the content that you want. The AI prompts, and if anyone's used like GPT or anything like that before, it's like telling it how to act, how to respond, like how to speak and things like that. And then we'll finish up with a few client examples that are live, and then that'll give you an idea of what they've used it for. But of course, if you have your own use cases you want to discuss, please drop those into the chat at any time. If you have any questions, we'll be answering those throughout as we go, and we'll spend a wee bit of time at the end as well. And if you wanted maybe like a personalized demo, you could reach out to your account manager and arrange that separately as well. So we're going to jump straight in. Obviously, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, and we'll go through there. But as basically our AI in a nutshell is really a way of being able to help users find that important content on your site and help them convert without having too much human intervention. So, good things like reducing support volumes by putting in FAQs, speeding up decision-making processes. If people are in that sort of research phase on the site, they want to be able to find answers quickly. They don't want to have to dig around too much or put in inquiries whenever they're not quite ready to speak to, a salesperson yet. So it's really good for that. Can also serve visitors from anywhere in any language, is multilingual. As you'll see in a wee second, because we're using the GPT language model. And for now, we've added them to chatbots and in-page bots. So a couple of different ways that we can deploy those, deploy that live chat throughout those different bots on the site to give the best user experience. And of course, with everything that we do, GDPR is obviously in our mind. So all the data stored securely in the EU. Again, it's why we've chosen those specific language models to work with, so that we know that we know where the data is stored, and we know where it's going to be at, which is obviously really, really important. And Helen has made us this lovely infographic here that will give us an idea of how it works, in terms of like how we take that base level of ChatGPT, we layer our knowledge base onto it, which is pulled from your content essentially. So you tell it where to learn from, combines those two things together, and then from there we give it the prompts, which is how do you respond, how do you act, what are you supposed to say to visitors to the site. And then that's where it comes into that sort of the visitor AI conversation space, where they're asking the questions and it's pulling from that information. Where Leadoo is then different from maybe other AI chatbots that you may have seen is that we have the dynamic suggestions. So what will happen at that point is, rather than just relying on the visitor to type in the relevant questions every time, because they may not know exactly how to phrase what they want, it'll prompt them with questions that it thinks that they'll be asking. So if it's talking, in this case, we've got like a banking example, and because you've asked a question about banking, it will just generate sort of a few questions that you might want to ask next, like how do I close my account? I've lost my card, because sort of logically in the AI's mind, that's the next sort of questions you might want to be asking. So it really helps them find the questions they're looking for much faster. But as with everything that we're trying to do here at Leadoo is to try, obviously increase conversions. We want to be able to transfer from the AI into the sort of lead gen aspect. So we don't want everyone to lose the human touch. We want to be able to give people access to live chat and our lead capture forms, like the nodes in there that can ask for the contact details at all times, so that we're always sort of sticking to that core value of let's try and increase conversions here as much as possible. And then hopefully at the end of all that, you get a new lead that has had a really good user experience. They found the information they want really quickly, and then they've been able to either speak to a real human or leave their details and book that demo or whatever it may be. Okay. If there's any questions so far, obviously feel free to jump in. If not, we'll move on to the first building block of our AI tool, which is the knowledge base. So as I mentioned before, it's what we're training the AI on. So it does have that GPT layer of base knowledge, but we want to then layer on top of that the content, like content specific to your use case and your products and your services. So it's basically giving the AI content to learn from. And this is really, really important because it's only as strong as the content that it's given. So if you're scanning your website and maybe there's blogs there from like 2016, for example, it'll be able to access those and it'll be able to give those as answers and reference those. And if it's out of date, for example, it's going to give out of date answers because that's what it thinks is true. So it's really important to start from a really good knowledge base of up to date content. And that will bring us on to the next point of using specific pages is much better than that sort of broad approach, especially for larger sites where maybe you do have a backlog of content and there may be some contradictory content there if you've changed your product or services. You know, maybe if you're thinking about like course dates and things like that, like they might be out of date. So it's really good to be very specific there as much as you can. And you can use a mixture of URLs and documents. So maybe you've got like data sheets or brochures, pricing guides, things like that. They can be uploaded as a combination of those two things. Sort of some tips here would be, as I say, like keeping it a smaller knowledge base works better. Specific pages with a smaller knowledge base works better, because if you think about it, it has to go to scan this information and train itself on it. Then it fetches that information to try and give the answer. So the more it has to work through and go through, and as I say, if there is contradictory information in there, it makes the sort of the answers less relevant. So smaller, more specific knowledge bases is always better. And the good news is that scanning and training can be done in minutes. We just put the URL. We'll show you how it works now. But basically, you just tell it where to scan and train, and it'll give you those. It'll give you the response really, really, really quickly. So let's come out of this 2 seconds and jump into the platform. So we have a demo set up already here. If we go into the knowledge base, we can see. We'll just start from fresh, and I'll show you one we've already done. So we've got the knowledge base here, where we would just give it a name, give it a bit of a description, and then in this case, we'll be adding the data sources. And then from there, this is a case where we can add in those bits of content. So for example, if we wanted to upload a file, maybe we wanted to upload our latest conversion crunch, for example, we could add that. Or we wanted to add websites, domains, or specific pages. So it would just be a case of going to your website, copying this, and adding it in. So either as a page specific option or as a domain. Now, if you're doing the domain itself, you would tell it like how from this domain, how many pages do you want to scan? And then what it would do in that case is it would go to your sitemap to pull out those URLs, and that's how it would populate that scan. And then just like we have with the chatbot, if you're familiar with how our chatbot triggers work, we can include and exclude certain pages based on those sort of keywords. So we can say, let's scan the Leadoo pages, but only include pages that have the term blog or the term product or the pricing and things like that. So we can be very specific about the content that we want to show. And then what I'll do now is I'll just show you an example we've done earlier. So on Leadoo AI, if we just click into the database, what we've done here is we've scanned the Leadoo AI page, and you'll see that it says trained. Now, if I click on trained, this is really the information that it's been able to pull from that page. So it's trained itself on this page here, which is all about our AI tool. And then from there, it has split it into the lovely named chunks. And then from here, we can see this is what it's learned from that pages. So it's broken up into sections basically, and it's stored that information. So if you were to ask it a question about, what is Leadoo AI, it'll pull that answer specifically from here. So that's why I say it's really important to use up-to-date web pages, up-to-date pieces of content, whether they're data sheets or course guides, price lists, for example. Like it's very important to do that. And in terms of the the scanning, as an idea of how that would work, if we just add a new data source, we'll add the page and we want to give it another little information about our product, which is the conversion kit. If we click scan, it'll start to scan those pages. And hopefully by the time I'm finished talking, or if we get a question, it'll have scanned those. And then we can see, sort of just as an idea, like how long it takes to do that. It'll tell you when it was scanned. So it thinks that information is true from that date. It now says ready to train. So we'll just hit train there, and then it'll give us the more up-to-date information from there.
Gavin, could you show us, or at least what would be the best way to make sure that the information that we train the AI on is up to date? So, of course, we talked about like making sure that anything kind of old isn't put into the knowledge base, but what if it's like a page that regularly gets updated with new information?
Yeah, so, as you've seen there, that I just retrained the AI. Now, it wouldn't be feasible for you to come in and just like do this manually, especially if it was going to be something that's updated all the time. We do have the option at the very top, which is automatically rescan and retrain knowledge base after a certain amount of days. So if you are getting that information from, if we use the course guide again, if you're updating that regularly for the course pages, or even you're adding new blog pages and things like that, you can set this to be a certain amount of days. So you would just base this number on how often you think you would be adding new content there. So maybe every 30 days, every week, whatever you would decide, and that will automatically do that for you. So you won't have to come in to manually train it again. But you can see how quick that was there. So once it actually does that training, it is very quick to get the information in.
My other question was kind of, is there like a maximum limit? And then a kind of additional to follow up on it was about like training on other people's websites. So does it only have to be yours?
So yeah, I mean, the first part of that question is easy to answer in that we can add a new data source and the domain could be Leadoo, and then from there we can tell it to scan as many as we like. It will do up to 1,000 pages. So if you do have a very large site, you can have more than one knowledge base per platform, and you'll be able to show this whenever you're doing your prompt part of which one to select. So maybe you've got one that's for customers, and then maybe you've got a knowledge base that is specifically about products. The customer one could be about FAQs, for example. So each knowledge base can scan 1,000 sources. So a source would be a web page or a document. And then you can do up to 1,000 of those, as I say, but you can have as many knowledge bases as you want per platform. As for scanning other people's websites, so, I mean, it's a bit of a gray area in that, you could essentially put anything in here. It's sort of one of those ones where you should only really be scanning your own content, because it's obviously in your best interest to give it that information. We have had some clients who would be using like government websites and publicly available information like that to support their needs. So if you were working in like finance or pension services and things like that, you might want to be able to pull in from those government sites that have official information and rules and guidelines around those sorts of things. But other than that, I would definitely not recommend it, no, because you couldn't trust it, unless you knew you're getting information from a reliable source that's updated regularly. It'd probably be more damaging than it would do you any good.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Great. Let's see. So we have a couple of questions in here. When Leadoo gives an answer, does it pull all the copy in the chunk or just parts? So it's whatever it can scan from that page. So it really depends on how the page is laid out. For example, like this one is pretty straightforward because it's just, it's a fairly standard web page where we've built it in sections in our CMS, and it's sort of just text blocks throughout. So it will be able to just pull all this information in, no problem. Where it would have to maybe create different sections, or you might need to use guides if it's like images embedded within those pages, for example. Like if you were trying to put in a pricing guide, but you put it in a table, and that table was uploaded as a PNG or something like that, for example. Like it wouldn't be able to pull from that specifically, but you could create that as a CSV or as an Excel file and put that into the knowledge base. So there are sort of other ways around that. It'll basically just pull any text that it can from the site. So I hope that answers that. Now, before we move into the prompts, was there anything else we wanted to cover on the knowledge base, or?
I think those are the questions that I had written down actually for it. So I think we can move on.
There's a couple of ones just to tidy up, I suppose, here. Yes, we'll be doing some real examples later on. We've got an FAQ one about nurseries, and then we have a very product focused one, which is drawing from data sheets about like product specs and how to advise on those products. So there's a couple, and we'll have a course one as well, because it's a really good example for AI. And yes, it is so potentially it is available for everyone. It depends on what package you're on, so you can discuss that with your account manager. But it's available for all the in-page bots and the chat bots. But depending on your package, it may be an add-on. But you can obviously discuss that with your account manager. And I think that is all the questions for now. So if I hand over to Helen, you can take over.
I can.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to cover a little bit about prompts, but really this is just kind of like what's the purpose of them and some tips and tricks for doing this. So if you do have AI as part of your subscription already, but also just kind of understand a little bit more about like what you need to tell it. So Gavin's already kind of covered like what does it need to know in its knowledge. So that's all the pages. But we also need to give it some kind of instructions on how we want it to actually, have the conversations with your visitor. So a couple things, kind of, I suppose, some tips that are here. And the biggest one is probably the one at the start, which is to write your prompts. You could say write your prompts as if you're talking to a 5-year-old or an intern. So basically no ambiguity in the instructions. Because we realize that when we talk to people, especially when you're used to talking about a subject, we kind of infer things and we understand things. But with the AI, you have to be really clear about what you want. So, for example, if you want it to answer in a particular way, in this case, I've just said, if you want it to use British English, don't just say, do this, but give it an example of how to. So write it in British English and use, instead of using organization with a Z, use it with an S. So that's a really basic example, but you would probably want to do that with, various things. So how would you like it to talk about your business? Things like that. And that really is kind of, I suppose, repeated here. So if you want it to answer in a very particular way, tell it this. So even though the information might have been in its knowledge base, sometimes we want to give it like a particular sentence. That way we can kind of control sort of thereabouts, like how it's going to answer each and every time. So I'll show you in a moment actually what the prompt looks like in the platform. But a really good example of this is if someone says that they want to contact someone at the business, how do we want it to respond? So we can be a bit more considered, do we want to tell it to, send an email? Or in our case, we'd want it to either like go through to live chat or leave a message, rather than kind of forwarding them to a contact page to a form. So we want to make it as easy as possible for someone to get in touch with us. And I guess that's comes into those next 2 points as well. So always providing an option for visitors to be able to contact you, because otherwise we don't want them to get stuck in that loop of AI. And, if there is something that you want to be done the same way every time, if visitor answers this, follow this journey, then that's where our automated chat comes into play. So, our tried and tested way of having conversations with people, predictable kind of pre-scripted conversations. And that's why we want to be able to use these things together. So let me jump over into the platform and I'll just show you a little bit more about what that actually looks like. So here can you see my the app? Just confirm for me.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So in here, this is just like a really basic one that we put together just for the demo. But you can see here we've got a specific node called AI chat. And in here, we've got a few different bits of information. So I'm just going to show you, explain a few of these very briefly, which is, so the AI model, we've got a few of these available, which just basically means, some of them work better for different purposes. So we have the standard GPT, but also a few others. We're not going to go into too much detail about that now, but it's just good to know that, we've got flexibility built in here. The knowledge base, which is exactly what Gavin suggested before, was going through with you, is that which knowledge base do we want to look at? Do we want to look at the customer service one, the services one, or the training one, if you've got different ones? And of course, we want to say, what language do we want to be able to have that conversation in? So this will be the default language it will speak to the visitors in.
Can you zoom in a wee bit on that?
Oh, yeah. Is it a bit small on my screen?
Yeah.
Let's go here. Better?
Yeah, that's much better.
All right, awesome. So this is the main thing that we're talking about, which is the prompt. So this goes in here and we're giving various instructions. So it's kind of saying, how long do we want the responses to be? Then, how do we want it to respond? So as I said before, never instruct the visitor to please visit our website. Instead, provide clickable links. So we're giving it that instruction. We're also saying, who is it you're acting in as assistant? How do we want that conversation to go about? What kind of purpose does it have within this conversation? There's also things about making sure that it only answers questions about your business. So just a few kind of tips to make sure that if someone asks the AI how to bake a cake, it's not going to try and lead them down a journey and send them off to recipes. We're trying to keep it on task. Because if anyone has ever used ChatGPT before, as you know, or an AI chat on someone else's website, you can do some fun things with it if you don't put instructions like this in. So we do actually have a template for this, which is what I've pasted in here. So you can see we've got some kind of placeholders that you can use. So if you did want to play around with this, there is a QR code where you can see this template and use that as a base. So we've kind of done the hard work for you in testing this out and making sure that it works. And forgive my Grammarly for apparently showing that I'm making lots of mistakes in my prompt. But sometimes it's good to just repeat things over for it to make sure that it always does the right thing. The same comes again with the dynamic suggestions. So Gavin mentioned this before. So this is where the AI will follow up with kind of questions that the visitor can ask rather than relying them to always type it. So in the same ways, we can give it a few tips on how we, what kind of things we want it to respond with. Let me go back here. So this is the QR. So if you do want to kind of pick it up, that's where you can go to the template. It's just a Google document that you can get that text. We like to do it that way. So we just have a document to always call back to that we can kind of copy paste into the platform. So I know that I kind of ran through this a bit quickly, but it's really just to kind of give you the skeleton of what needs to go into a prompt. But I think if you've used AI by now, you have a little bit of an idea of, how you go about making sure that the AI responds to you in the way that you want it to.
Just have a quick question about the the languages. So you mentioned about, use the British English there, for example, and you showed the drop down of the default language. If someone just starts asking a question in Spanish or French or German, can you, how would you add that in the prompt? Would you need to add it in the prompt to make it respond in kind, or will it just know to do it?
So it's a good idea just to add that as a sentence in there. So there's a couple things that the AI will do as default, but sometimes it's good to just kind of bolster it with a couple sentences. So one example that I think, Gavin, you mentioned before is just saying, please answer in the language that you are spoken to. So even if its default language is in English and the rest of your chatbot is in English, if someone starts talking to the chatbot in Spanish, it's able to switch. So if you are a global business, this is really valuable, especially if you don't have the multiple kind of subdomains in different languages, this can still service kind of customers across the globe without you needing to be sitting there and translating content.
Nice. And is there a good size for, like, I mean, you've got the template there. Is that like the maximum size of characters you could put in? Because you did mention like it doesn't do any harm to maybe repeat yourself a few times to like make sure, again, sort of treating it like a 5-year-old, like do this. Here are some exact examples of when this may happen. Like, how does that work in terms of like the character limit?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do have quite a high character limit. So you can have up to 1,000 characters. But if you can keep it to the kind of template length that we give you, which is, I think it's about between 200 and 400, it's a good idea. The reason being is that the more information is in there, the more opportunity it is that it could kind of lose some of it, pick up another. But ultimately, just make sure that the information in the prompt is relevant as possible. So we're not including lots of too much information, which is where the knowledge base comes into play. So that's where you want it to learn from the content rather than writing it all in the prompt.
Excellent.
All right.
I don't see any others for now, and I think people are dying to see
The
a
actual
few
example.
examples. Yeah. But I mean, it's important to cover this bit first because we want to basically, stress like how it's built up from that knowledge base and the prompts, so that you get a clear understanding of like where is it getting these answers from and how is it being able to generate these answers. So, it's very important to see where it comes from.
All right. Well, in that case, then, shall I kick off with my example, or do you want to take
Yeah,
over?
you go. You're sharing there, so you go first, and I can do the other two.
All right. So I'm going to open up this one. So this is a client that we recently launched with. But what I want to show you is how we've handled the training side of their business. So they do offer kind of products and services as well as a really large range of training. So just like in Gavin's example earlier about having different knowledge bases, this is why we've decided to kind of separate them up to make sure that if someone only wants to know about training, then we're making sure that we have the most relevant information for them. So I'm going to go through this one. So you can see at the moment, we're using an automated journey to get someone to the right point. So I'm asking about a training course. I've then gone into the categories, and now it's connecting to AI. So you can see we've got like a little introduction here. So the person knows that they're talking with AI. We've already got some kind of suggested questions, but there's always the kind of answer box at the bottom there. And you can see our static button is speak with an agent. So this is actually connecting to live chat if I did click this right now. So you can see that that visitor is never going to get stuck in this AI conversation. So I've just asked it, what information security courses do you offer? In fact, let me zoom in a little bit because I imagine if it was small before, it's probably a bit small now. That'll do. So what it's given me is a couple clickable links to actual training that is offered. So it means that that person can go straight over to that page, get more information about it, or if they can see that this is the training course that they want, then they can go and speak to an agent. A couple of things that are quite handy to know about, which is, always having this kind of information displayed here. So we're always being quite transparent that someone is talking to AI. And there is also sources under here as well. So just to kind of, I suppose, bolster that trust in the information that it's providing. So it will say, where did I find this information? And in this case, it will be obviously the pages that we've trained it on. But I can continue to ask questions. So like, what qualifications do I need? And continue that conversation until I, as a visitor, I'm satisfied with the information that I'm given or that I'm ready to get in touch. So the idea being is that we're trying to get them further down that funnel. We're answering those FAQs, saving the live chat agents doing this beginning part. So when they do get in touch, we should be at a point where, a conversion or a booking is made in this case. All right, I won't go through more of the training options, but you can see this is live right now, so you can play around with this a little bit. but please spare our kind of live chat team with LRQA from any questions, but you can test out the AI in here at least. We do also have our AI landing page, and you can play around with the bots there to your heart's content.
Excellent. So I'll show you a couple more. This one is Topstay Nursery. This one is more FAQ focused. So the purpose behind this AI tool for them was really they were getting loads of inquiries in, like people ringing up all the time to ask questions that they could, potentially service through the site, but their site's quite big and there's quite a lot of information there for people to dig around. So they really wanted to reduce those inbound calls. So whenever you first load up the bot, it goes, so unlike LRQ, this goes straight into AI. And again, this is just sort of best practice that we would recommend. It's almost sort of like setting expectations and letting people know that you're chatting to an AI, and it means that they know what to expect, and then maybe if they've experienced before, they know how to interact. So again, we've put some options there for them to get started, and we've also put in those sort of get out of AI pathways. So discuss with us live or let me book a visit, and that will go down to either chat with the team directly or to leave their details. So if we click on this, what funding options are available, again, it'll pull in this information. It offers various funding options such as 50 and 30 hours free childcare for eligible families, etc. And then using the dynamic suggestions that Helen touched on, because we've asked about funding and it's given us information about this, it then generates 3 questions that it thinks would be like the sort of next logical things people would ask. How do I apply? Can provide more information about this? And again, it'll just keep giving people down that path about more information. And it's pulling this information. We look at the sources, from all the pages that we've been able to scan and upload into the knowledge base from their website. So again, you'll notice that every time the questions change, and you probably seen from Helen's example, it will say like, don't repeat the same question. So it would just generate 3 new questions every time, or as many or as little as you want to add into this option. So again, you can just keep clicking through, but you'll always have the option to get out or ask your own specific question if you want. And then once you have your information you need, you can then jump over to discuss that with us live or book in a visit directly. So again, it's helping people get that information and then moving them down through as soon as they can. And then another example we have is from Matrix Works. So they're one of our longest serving customers, and they were an early adopter of AI. They have quite a complex product. So they've got lots and lots of downloads, like technical documents and data sheets. So where it pulls most of the information is from there. This is also a good example of the language responsiveness of the bot. So they do have one which starts, I'd like to talk to AI in my language. So I'm going to test this now and hope it works. So I have translated this in Google Translate for Dutch. I don't speak Dutch, just as a quick disclaimer. So if anyone does and this is wrong, you can correct me. So if you put the question in that language, fingers crossed, it should then answer. Again, I don't have, it's sort of done a bit and then it's went back to English, which is a bit strange. But the idea is that it would be able to give that information from that. If it's pulled this directly from a data sheet, it might not have been able to translate those directly. It did start with this in Dutch, so that might just be the case from there. If I refresh this to show you the other pathways from there. So they are, what would I say? Like, so they're sort of like task specific. So what do you need? What do you need today? So like, I have an edge blending project. I need to make a video wall, for example. And then from there, it'll take you down to a different AI path. So again, you've got that ask anything, which shows you you're in AI. We already know that from the start because it's AI assistant. And then from there, it's generated these questions, which is sort of use cases for specific products. So again, like if you're putting this information in, it'll go to the data sheets, pull that information back out for them, and be able to answer for them about the functionality of the products themselves. Now you'll notice this one sort of goes, a wee bit sort of more not slowly, but it's sort of it's a wee bit more sort of contemplative, if you like. So this one is using GPT-4. We sort of touched briefly on language models at the start, but we have access to a couple of different language models based on GPT, so we can experiment with how it looks and how it loads and how it speaks. So you'll be able to try those out as well. And again, you can see where that sources are coming from, if they've been coming from specific documents or if they came from specific URLs. Great. Any other questions for now? I think there are a couple of good examples there. We got this one's very product focused, so it is drawing from those data sheets. This one is FAQ focused, so it's pulling from content that they have on the site to help answer questions. And Helen's example is a great one about those courses and being able to answer those questions about eligibility and give links to those specific courses that people might want to be able to try to help them go through to the right place quicker.
Okay. So I think, was it Reese who asked earlier about like how it does those responses or what it's like? So hopefully that gives you a better idea of what it actually acts like when you're talking with it. And you can see it's quite quick at coming back. So even in Gavin's example that was slower, it wasn't actually slow. You still felt like you were getting a response within a really fast period of time. So I think in a lot of cases that we found when we've got a large range of FAQs or a large kind of amount of products, this is where it's really coming into its own, because we're actually just making it so much easier for people to find the information and get kind of a summarized chunk of kind of response in some cases, or in matrix works where we want to give a really in-depth response. So we're kind of taking that onus off of us to be able to like either answer this information on live chat or write it up, manually as content into these chat bots. So it kind of works hand in hand with the stuff that, we do want to write in manually, but, this kind of wider knowledge where we want it to kind of do the legwork for us, really.
Excellent. Okay, so let's jump back. Again, we'll just leave this on the questions point for now. And I suppose just to reiterate, if you did have any specific use cases in mind, maybe you wanted to try it for yourself, if you get in touch with your account manager. What we've done before is specifically for these clients who have gone live that we just shown examples, we would have done a personalized demo for them where they would have given us the use case. We would have went away, scanned their website or uploaded the documents, built the prompts out the way Helen was showing using that template, built in a chatbot for that. Then we can go through the demo together and show you how it would work, and then send you away with that so you can test it and get feedback from the wider team. Basically sort of just try and figure out what sort of questions you might be asking and is it giving the right answers and things like that. So if that is something you're interested in, you can get in touch with your account manager and we can look to set that up. As Helen said, we've got Leadoo AI on our, if you just go to leadoo.com/AI, there is the option to see how it performs as the in-page bot in the middle or the chat bot in the bottom right. And again, you can ask it anything here. You can go through the different pathways and it'll be able to answer those sort of questions. So again, you'll get an idea of how it can respond.
So David's just asked a question about, I think probably more so in the matrix example where there's a lot of information before, you kind of get to the end, and then there's almost like follow-up questions that pop up. I think in your top stay nursery one, you had a better example of it being maybe a shorter response.
So yeah, and I think as part of the prompts, you'll be able to touch on this a bit more in that. So the matrix one is a very specific example because they need to give that information in a detailed form, and they specifically don't mind that it is quite a long answer because their visitors need to know those details. For the likes of Tops, they're the other way. They want it short, snappy responses, and so whenever you're in the prompts area, let me just see if this is big enough.
Yeah, I think at the top, actually, I think I've got it written in.
So your responses should never be longer than 400 characters and always prioritize accuracy and relevance. So you can be very prescriptive about it and say, look, keep your answers under a certain amount. You can also tell it to use bullet points. You can tell it to highlight certain word, like respond. If you're giving course names or product names, always put them in bold. So there is ways that you can make it stand out more and sort of trim the answers down. It depends, as I say, like on the use case. Like for your example, I suppose if it was a course, David, you could do, show the course name in bold, give a brief description of the course, and no more. You could be very specific about that sort of thing. So again, that's where the prompts would come in, and how you would tell it to behave.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a very good question. And with the AI and getting it to kind of like respond the way you want it to, and in the same way actually that we work with you when we write the bots in the first place. We kind of do a prompt where we think it's going to get us the majority of the response that we want, but then there's a bit of like tweaking back and forth. And just like you can preview all the other bots in the app as well, hit that preview button, we can test how the AI is responding to various questions and just kind of iterate on that. So you still have those same abilities, kind of like test and change.
Yeah, exactly. And for these client examples, the first pass we did for them was not the end result, because they did have to go and test it internally and get people to ask questions that maybe they didn't think of, and then go from there. So there's lots of testing to be done on that to make sure you're 100% happy. And actually, you reminded me something there that we haven't touched on yet, which is
yes.
how to see this information. So how to see the visitor feedback. What questions are they asking, and what answers is the AI giving, and is it being correct? Is it relevant? So if you go to the leads area, and unless they do become a lead, I mean, most of them will be unconverted, so they haven't given their details yet. They're still sort of researching. If you click on that, it'll store all the chat. This is a better one here. It'll store all the chat that they've had together in here. So you'll be able to see, tell me about Leadoo AI, please. That's the visitor's question. And then you can see AI answer, and this is what it was able to provide. So the more testing you do and the more interactions you have with customers, for example, it'll be able to store all that information in here as an individual discussion. So what I was doing there, that would count as one discussion. And then so that whole discussion would be stored in this one place. And then you'd be able to sort of analyze, well, what are the sort of questions that people are asking most, and is it giving the correct answers and things like that. So it's all there to be able to be reviewed as well.
Yep. And just like with any of the other kind of interactions that customers have, so if you are familiar with the journeys, like visitor journeys or company ID, then it's going to obviously compile that conversational data into those sort of records as well. All right. Well, we've used up our time this time around, but I think we've just about managed to fit everything in.
I think that might be the first time we've got bang on the time.
Yes. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And as we said before, if you would like to explore this in a bit more detail for a specific use case or for your business, reach out to us. But we're going to send the slides, I think, out afterwards, just in an email, but you'll get an automatic email just to say that the recording's available as well. So all the usual stuff when you join a webinar, basically.
I think we've got one last question from David before we wrap up.
Matt. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but yeah, we'll send the slides, and that'll have all the cheats on it and the prompts and things. So
I'm not sure whether the chat is just very slow, so we'll wait in suspense.
I'm not sure if we can let people speak, to have access to their mics.
No. I think you might have to type it, David.
That's not something we've come across before about people actually asking.
That's a good point.
I mean, if not, we can always give you. I can always give you a shout after this, Dave. I don't have any meetings directly after, so I can give you a quick call.
think we might have to go that way. Uh-huh.
I suppose it's sort of it's just the next stage of our chatbots. Really, that's the same sort of thing I suppose we would get with with the chatbot, because without the AI, it's almost sort of automated anyway, because we've sort of predicted what people would say, and we're creating those pathways for people to go down. So it's the same sort of thing. This is just in the sort of the next level. That's why we're always very keen to include things like discuss with us live or let me book a visit, to be very clear that you are chatting to AI, but there is always the option to go out and chat to a real human, or to leave that information. So I mean, it could, I suppose it depends on the visitor, but it's really just the next evolution of our bots. But as long as we're, giving people clear outs that they can get out of AI and they can chat to a real person, we were finding that really useful. And actually, for the MatrixWorks examples, we've seen that most of their leads that have came through have had an AI touch point. So going into that research phase first and asking those questions has led to them getting more leads.
And I think I have an example where I was building bots for IT services company, and we actually did a bit of a mixture of the two different approaches. So one of them, we only had it under the I have a question option. So they were already had like various options to get in touch or get more information. So we were just making it a kind of, we really haven't answered your questions. Let's get the AI to try and help. Okay.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that is a good point, because it's the same with the other bots as well. How much information do you give before trying to get them on the phone? Because a lot of the leads that are coming through, you really want to get that in the hands of the salespeople so they can chase them down, and they can go from there. So I suppose again, it's trial and error, it's testing, it's seeing, having it obvious, or as Helen said, as just one option of the question. Like, ask a question: does that improve your conversion rate? Do you get better leads through? Do you get less but better, and then do you get more, and sort of less quality the other way?
Right. I think it's probably just us and you, David, now. So if there is anything else, like, by all means, like, we'll do a separate session. Well, I say we, Gavin will do a separate session. Right. I think we can call it there.
Great. All right. That's it for now. And then we'll see you on the next one, hopefully.
Thank you.
All the best of it.
Bye.
Bye.